guys, welcome back to Cadence RC. Hey, so today, finally wanted to kind of sit down. I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I haven't really felt like I've had enough knowledge to be able to give you guys exactly what I think you need, what I needed, to finally kind of set up your Slash four-wheel drive for outdoor, basically for an 8 scale outdoor track. So this is my Slash. I've got my body unclipped, so it's sitting a little bit higher. So I'm obviously running. So just to kind of give you the background of my truck, let me grab one thing while I'm thinking about it. And so my car started out life as a BL2S truck. So it's not that old. But yeah, it started out as BL2S and it's been upgraded from there. So this motor system that's in this truck and it's got a hobby wing motor system that I've upgraded to. It's also been upgraded to the GTR shocks. It's been upgraded with a chassis brace, and then it's also got all adjustable camber links on it all the way across. So just to kind of show you guys there what I've got going on. So really this car is more powerful than what you would get with a Slash Ultimate, but otherwise pretty close because it's all the HD parts. Oh, actually, no, the Ultimate wouldn't have the HD parts. So some of my advice isn't going to translate perfectly to an HD because they don't have some of the things that this has, or to an Ultimate because they don't have some of the parts that these have. So anyway, I guess I'll just start with my chassis tuning. It'd be kind of a good place to start, I guess, as good as any. So just to show you here, I ended up moving. So originally I had my ESC back here closer to the motor and then my receiver up front here. And I ended up moving that all forward. Did a lot of moving around of the battery to try and find the best position for it, and kind of ended up settling with pretty much centered in this bay. It's actually just, let's see, I think we're just slightly back of center. Yeah, by like a quarter of an inch. And then I actually just put some screws into this foam. They actually happen to be the right weight. So there's actually 4 screws in there that were kind of to make this thing perfect as far as balance. So this thing actually flies surprisingly well. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've done as far as the chassis setup. This truck does have, so obviously you've got the front and rear diffs, and then it's also been upgraded with a center diff. And so just to kind of go into that next, the front diff, as far as my fluids, because man, I had a hard time finding anything. I tried finally just messing around with the very light fluids like you would run in the Techno, but their diffs are definitely a different grade of diff. The gearing in those is very different. These need a little bit heavier diff fluid than what those need. I found that running those very light fluids was just too light, and you would have to change it after every race. I didn't want to have to do that much maintenance. So what I've got in it currently, and I'm not 100% convinced that I'm perfect yet, but I'm running 20, and that's 20,000. So when you look at the label on the top, it's going to say 20 in the front. I'm running 30 in the center, and then I'm actually mixing 20 and 15 to get to 17.5 in the back. I'm probably going to drop down to a 20 also in the center diff. I think that's going to have me just perfect. I was finding, so I had a lighter diff fluid in the back, and what I was finding is that it wanted to swap ends at the end of long straightaways. We still want that little bit heavier fluid in the front because it's going to help us through the corners. So we're going to have a little bit more rear wheel drive action. So the car's going to handle better in the corners with just a little bit lighter fluid in the back. But yeah, going too light made it want to swap ends at the end of fast straightaways. So that's huge. That was probably the hardest thing to test because it's the thing that takes the most time to set up. Mind you, hats off to Traxxas. This is such an easy car to work on. If for those of you that haven't yet jumped into changing out your diff fluids, it's nothing. There's I don't know why I'm even going into this, but there's so many videos. But basically, you take off these couple of screws here, you take off the upper link, you take off these screws in the back, and this section just flips right out. It's nothing. Same thing in the front, and then getting to the center diff is just as easy. Anyway, yeah. So diff tuning, that's a good place for you guys to start. 2020. 20, 25, somewhere in there, definitely 20. You can still experiment. I'm still planning to experiment. I'm probably going to end up, I'm guessing I'm going to end up at 20 and then 17.5 in the back. And that's really, really close. As far as the shock fluids for outdoor, so we're pretty hot here. So we need a pretty heavy fluid. I've actually settled on 40 in the front, 50 in the rear, and then I'm up one on the springs. So I'm running the pink springs all the way around. And that seems to have things really, really well settled as far as how the car is handling overall. And then as far as the ride height, I've always been kind of big on taking a lot of measurements from my shocks. I really like to have that stuff be as accurate as it can be. And then I've talked about in the past, setting up my arms, right, so that they're pretty level, and that's still true. I did settle on, as far as getting an overall height for this car, I'm running it, so I use one of these little low seat ride height gauges now, and I did finally kind of settle on roughly 20 as far as the ride height is pretty good. 20, 21, somewhere in there. And then as far as getting that measurement, because I don't know how yours are, but I've seen this a lot with the Slashes, that they want to kind of stick. So like that, like I can lift it up and it kind of wants to stay. And so getting your measurements can be a little bit tricky with these. And so I found, and I can't really do this on, this table is so flimsy, but I actually do this on the ground, and I like to drop it and let it roll forward like a lot. And that seems to get me to where I can get that measurement pretty consistent, and without having any problems. And so that's kind of how I've been handling the ride height. And then as far as, I'm just trying to think of where I'm at. As far as camber and stuff, I'm really going basic. It's 1 degree, 1 degree, and I guess that'd be minus 1 degree on front and rear. And I'm towed out in the front like half a degree, something like that. Roughly, I'm not finding with the off-road cars that it doesn't have to be as precise as what it is with like my oval cars, but that's a pretty decent place to start. And then, so something that if you have the HD parts like I do, one of the things that's kind of a problem is getting our negative travel, right? That's super important when you're hitting a bump. You want the car to stick to the ground as much as possible, and so we want to have a decent amount of negative travel. And I found that in the rear, the front's not so much a problem. I just run it as stiff as I can as far as the tie bar, but in the back, I'm actually running it as loose as I can, and I'm running my camber links, so I'm actually in the outside bottom hole, and then I actually shifted to the lower hole in the back to get my camber gain decent. So I'm running. This car right now has about 5 degrees of camber gain. It'd probably be nice if that was closer to 7, but with this HD part and running, running the sway bar, I can't. I can't get the camera link to that to get to that position. But so that's giving me though a pretty good overall balance as far as camber and camber gain. Going through the corners. So just to talk about camber gain, because I've actually decided that's something super important to pay attention to. So when we're going through the corners, right, and you look at that tire, right? So if I'm turning and I've got the pressures coming on the outside of the car, right? I can lean that thing out, and you can see that tire stays very flat. It's not perfectly flat, and that's where I wish that I have just a tiny bit more available that I could play with, because I would probably go just one more as far as my camber gain in the back of this car, but this is at least getting close for those of us that have the HD parts and want to run a sway bar. Again, I'm running that sway bar as loose as I can. I want to keep, and I probably would get rid of it, except that I know that with the GTRs, they do like to pop off the caps when you're jumping them. And you're on an 8-scale course, it can be some pretty big jumps, and so I want something to limit my droop. And these, unfortunately, there's no way to set the droop other than to have the sway bar stop the car from drooping. So that is how I'm setting my droop, is with that. And honestly, I just have them tight as far as how I've got my droop set, which is actually really close to what you see if you look at like a manual on a Techno and some of those other cars. It actually gets you really close to what you should have as far as droop. So Anyway, man, yeah, this has been a really, I'll say this, the Slash has been an incredible learning tool. There's, um, there's so many different configurations of this that I've had a really hard time finding information that would pertain to my conditions, my car and my conditions. And so I feel like for most of us that are racing, um, my configuration is not that far off from what anybody else's is going to be. The LCG chassis, a chassis brace, uh, having the sway bars, having the adjustable links. I think that's all normal stuff. So I think this should be something that should be really useful for a lot of people. Uh, and I do finally feel like I have a competitive truck in as far as running it against anybody. I still have a little ways to go as far as my driver skill and consistency, but I've been able to run right with technos and super serious cars. And I can't quite handle. I'm running this motor right now at 90%. I really need to get it to 100%, and I just don't quite have the skill to run at 100% on an outdoor course uh, yet. So that's my biggest failing as a driver at this point. But anyway, yeah, this hopefully this can kind of help you guys get through some of this and maybe some of those tuning things. As far as talking about camber gain. I've talked in the past about having the arms relatively level. Uh, ways to find center on these cars. This was a fascinating learning tool because I feel like I've learned more from setting up this car than I would have. I just got a Techno Mini Truggy, and I can tell you the factory setup, pretty awesome. So I'm not finding I have to learn anything from that truck. Whereas now, like with this, when I'm setting up my 10 scale buggy, I have an opinion because I'm like, no, look, when you do this camber or this adjustment, you can see that tire is way off, and I want to get a little bit more camber in that so that it's maybe got a little bit of slip because I'm having too much grip. So I'm going to put a little bit more into it, and those are the kinds of things that are going to make you a faster driver. But so in a way, this might be bad for you guys because you're not going to learn as much from the truck. But I think for a lot of us, we want to just have a decent truck and go out and run and have a good time. So maybe this will help you guys get to that point. Anyway, I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.